Hey guys, this is Maverick. I wanted to go over the Generation 5 Glock. There is a lot of controversy going on, a lot of confusion about the Generation 5 Glock that I believe is only in the Glock 19 and the Glock 17. I just purchased the Generation 5 Glock 19 and wanted to go over it with you guys and kind of point out the things that make it different and maybe clear up some of the confusion that's going on with some of these Glock guys about this Generation 5. So let's start with, let's go ahead and unbox this and we'll see what the Generation 5s come with. It comes with 3 magazines right out of the gate, as any Glock does. So right out of the gate we've got the magazines for the Generation 5s that are actually different in terms of the magazine follower, which is a orange follower, which I actually like quite a bit. If you've owned multiple Glocks before, normally this would be black, but the Generation 5s have come up with this, and again, I actually kind of like it. It's an obvious indicator that your magazines are empty, but more than anything, they're, I don't know, they're a little bit more obvious to an empty magazine, and for some reason I really like that. So I like that with the Generation 5s. The Generation 5s also come with 3 magazines, as most, if all the Glocks come with. So it comes with the 3 15-round magazines, and they all have that orange follower in it. Now, we've got the Glock here, which feels a lot different than the Generation 4s. I've owned a lot of Generation 3s, most Generation 3 Glocks, and quite a few of the Generation 4s. And there's a lot of similarities with this Generation 5 as there is with the Generation 4s. Especially the, I kind of call it a sandpaper kind of texture on here, which when you first get the Generation 4, the Generation 5, and you start really kind of feeling this Glock, your fingers will kind of start to feel a little bit torn up. But that'll go away just after some handling and after it gets smoothed out a little bit, so that's not too big of an issue. But there's quite a few changes that Glock made with these. The first thing that's obvious would be they took out the finger grooves, which outside of the early generations, this is the first time they've kind of brought those back. And they've got this cutout here in the grip, which is actually the one thing about this Glock that I do not like. And any of these Glock people know that this Glock base plate is just a flat base plate. So when you've got the magazine in there, you've got this gap in here. Now the reason they put this in here is if you have a malfunction and you need to pull this magazine out, you can really get in there and pull that out if you have a stuck magazine. Now, guys, I've never in my life had a hang-up in a Glock getting a magazine out. So that's a feature to me that's just, it's not worth it to me. So I do want to mention that Pierce makes a base plate that will make up for that gap. And basically it's the original flat base plate that has a extra lip here to make up for that gap. So what that'll do is clear that gap up right here, and that makes it perfect to me. So I bought 3 of those to put on all 3 of these magazines, and guys, that works perfectly. That solves that entire problem for me. So So that's perfect to me, and I like the no finger grooves, and I like that because it gives you options for wearing gloves, and your fingers aren't trying to make up for that extra, for those finger grooves. You can, it just works. For some reason, I really like that. Kind of reminds me a lot of a 1911 kind of grip, but it's perfect. I like it. They put the ambidextrous option magazine release in there also, which I believe is also on the Generation 4s. And they also have the ambidextrous slide release, which comes standard on there on both sides, which I also really, really like. One of the main controversies that I've heard about this Glock, now, if you are like me and you've owned multiple, if not every Glock model out there, Glock has decided on the Generation 5 that they're going to bevel this front end. And most people who have owned Glocks are familiar with Glock doing this on the 45s. Now, if you've had a Glock 30, a Glock 21, you will know that this is beveled. And a lot of the people that have been new to the Generation 5s have mentioned that the 19 and the 17 in the Generation 5 feel thicker and feel heavier. And I think the reason it feels that way, and it's not, this isn't any different than the Generation 3 or Generation 4 Glock 19. When it comes to size and weight, it's almost identical. And I think the reason why people are saying it feels thicker and feels heavier is because if they've owned a 45 caliber Glock or they've shot a 45 caliber Glock, the front is beveled like this is. And your natural reaction is to think that this is a 45 caliber Glock, which it is not. So a lot of people have been really confused about just how the Generation 5 Glock feels. And if you add in the fact that this is beveled and you're used to the 45s, it's really easy to feel like these are thicker like the Glock 45s would be. But, again, these are the same size as the Glock 19s in the Generation 3 and the Generation 4. Now, we're going to break this down, and there's a few changes that they've made on the inside of the Glock. One that I've noticed right away, and they advertise this, is the rifling inside the barrel is quite a bit different. But I'm not sure how it's different. So, when you've got any other Glock who basically is indestructible, extremely accurate, I'm not sure how they could really improve the rifling from what it originally was. So they've made that change, and there's a couple internal components here with the breakdown switch that's a little bit different. And I'm not real sure what they've done. There's a spring in there now, which I think it was more of like a metal lever that was switched down, where now it's being replaced with a spring. So interior wise, for the most part, that's really the only difference that I noticed or that I know about. But you know, it's whatever to me. But when it comes to aftermarket parts for the Glock, that's the downside that I have with the Generation 5s, is they haven't been out long enough where there's just an ungodly amount of aftermarket parts. The Pierce extension grips are easy. You know, those were, just got those on Amazon or eBay for $7 a piece. So that's no big deal. Now, when it comes to the shooting of the Generation 5, I absolutely love it. Like any other Glock, when I first bought this, I spent about a week just sitting with it, trying to figure out the differences and the comparisons between the Generation 3. I have a Glock 32 and the Generation 3, which is the 357 SIG, which is quite a bit heavier than a Glock 23 in the 40 or a Glock 19 in the 9mm. But this Generation 5 Glock 19 and the Generation 3 or 4 Glock 19, it really feels and shoots the same way. So I personally love the Generation 5 Glock 19. And this is my everyday carry. I carry this everywhere I go. And most of the time, I actually open carry. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which Albuquerque's crime rate is through the roof. And I open carry. And this is what I open carry. I carry it every day, and I love it. Shoots great, very accurate. I feel like it's a little bit more accurate than my Generation 3 Glock 19 was. So I'm very pleased with this. Now that I'm used to the changes, the finger grooves, I actually really, really like that the finger grooves have been taken out. For some reason, it just feels a little bit quicker to find a comfortable shooting position. So I'm very happy with it. When it comes to the aftermarket parts, when it comes to holsters, I picked up this Safariland. If you're familiar with Safariland, pretty much any police agency, law enforcement agency are very familiar with the Safariland holsters. Very good for duty holsters, and they're really starting to get in on the concealment holsters and the off-duty holsters. They're really stepping up their game with that. So I picked this up, which is a paddle holster with a thumb retention switch right here, which when your Glock is holstered, this lever needs to be activated, pushed down this way for that Glock to be removed. And that's the only way that this Glock is coming out of this holster. Now, when I bought this holster, I wasn't 100% sure how this lever worked. And I kind of did that on purpose. I wanted to find out how difficult it would be to figure this out. So I literally ordered the holster, got it home, and immediately went to this switch to find out how difficult this was going to be. And guys, honestly, it took me about 5 minutes to realize that this was the direction that this retention switch needed to go. So I love the fact that it's not a typical push button switch. I like that in order to pull this out, whoever's going for this weapons, their thumb literally needs to be in between this slide and my hip for them to get this out. So I love this for an off-duty concealment holster, even though I use this when I open carry, because I like that retention. So that being said, the Glock 19 Generation 5, I absolutely love it. I'm not sure what Glock was going for with this when it comes to the changes that they made. I've heard that they've made these to present to the military in picking a new sidearm because they are replacing the Beretta. So I'm thinking that the military came to Glock and said, we want to see a 9mm military Glock. And I believe that this and the Glock 17 is what they came up with. And I absolutely love it. I say give it a little bit more time and more aftermarket parts will be available. But if as a stock out of the box weapon, this has been incredible. I love the way it feels. After the confusion has gone away, this has actually become the my favorite Glock that I've ever owned, and I'm strongly considering getting a second one. But long story short, guys, I love this Glock. There's a couple things that are different, but if those different features don't work for you, there's a couple ways around it. So keep that in mind, and go Glock, man. This is this was better to me than the Generation 4s. The Generation 4s didn't really do it for me, but let me get this and get you guys to take a real good look at this, so you guys can see the difference. See all of this checkering, and the Glock comes with back straps as the Generation 4s do. But I do not use a back strap. I actually like the weapon without a back strap. It seems to fit my hand a lot easier without it. But it's got the typical rail for your light. Generation 5 here it says, and the ambidextrous slide release. The trigger, I've heard that the trigger's different. I've heard they've done a lot of different things with the trigger, but I've got to be honest, I haven't noticed a difference in this trigger compared to the Generation 3 and the Generation 4s. They say that there's a difference, The one thing I don't like about Glock is their triggers. And for some reason, it's just the feeling of having to, you know, you're breaking that glass rod. You know, that's what it feels like to me. And the reset, if anything is a little bit different, I feel like the reset is a little bit different. A little shorter, but in the grand scheme of things, to me, the triggers is not a whole lot different. But I like the features that they put into this, especially the missing finger grooves. For some reason, that just... my initial thought was that they were going backwards in the generation, but now that they're... when you're talking about a combat pistol, I get it. Because if you're wearing gloves, then it's easy to adapt to the finger grooves not being there, because whichever way you're manipulating the weapon, you don't have to adjust your fingers here. And if you replace the finger groove or the indentation here, you've actually got a real solid grip on this weapon. And I like the beveled front because if you're doing a push check, it's just, it's beautiful. Guys, I love this Glock. And if you have any questions about this Glock, you've been thinking about getting one or you just don't know a lot about it, feel free to shoot me a message. And if I don't know the answer, I'll look into it and I will get it answered for you. So, guys, good luck. Yeah, guys, Generation 5, Glock 19, I love it. And I hope you guys do too. And confusion doesn't last too long. But it works, guys. And I'll continue to carry it every day. I might upgrade the sights a little bit, but for the most part, I'm going to keep it stock. And on the next weapon, guys, I'll go ahead and do another review for you. And we'll keep it going, guys. Appreciate you. And happy hunting.